Marcus Hartwell sat in the first-class lounge at Chicago O'Hare International Airport, his silver cufflinks catching the cold fluorescent light as he typed furiously on his laptop, the glow illuminating a face that hadn't smiled in years, when a small voice beside him shattered the armor he'd spent a decade building. "Are you lost too, Mr.?" He looked down to find a little girl, no more than 7, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and loneliness that struck him like a blow to the chest. Marcus blinked, momentarily speechless, because in all his 53 years, through boardroom battles and corporate victories, through a failed marriage and a daughter who no longer answered his calls, no one had asked him a question so simple yet so devastatingly true. "Yes," he thought, "I am lost, perhaps more lost than I've ever been." "I'm not lost," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "I'm just waiting for my flight to Seattle." But even as the words left his mouth, they tasted like the lie they were. The little girl tilted her head, her dark curls bouncing slightly, and she said, "Oh, me too. Well, not Seattle. I'm going to Boston to see my grandma, because she's very sick, and Mommy and Daddy have to work. So I'm flying all by myself, like a big girl. But my special helper lady said she has to leave because of the storm, and now I have to wait 8 whole hours, and I don't know where to wait. And you looked lonely, so I thought maybe we could be lost together." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. A fissure in the wall he'd built brick by brick since his divorce 3 years ago. Since his daughter Sophia had looked at him with those same hurt eyes and said, "You were never really there anyway, Dad." He glanced around the bustling terminal, searching for an airline representative or guardian, and spotted a airline employee speaking rapidly into a phone. Near the gate, the announcement had just come. Through that all eastbound. Flights were delayed indefinitely due to a massive storm system, and the airport was descending into chaos. "What's your name?" he asked the little girl, and she smiled for the first time. A gap-toothed grin that reminded him so painfully of Sophia at that age that he had to look away. "I'm Emma Louise Patterson, and this is Mr. Hoppers," she said, holding up the stuffed rabbit, whose left ear was hanging by a thread. "He's been with me since I was a baby, and Grandma made him for me, and that's why I have to go see her. Because the doctors say she might not have very much time left, and I want her to know I love her." Marcus felt his throat tighten, thinking of his own mother who had passed 5 years ago, a funeral he'd left early to take a conference call, a guilt that still woke him at 3 in the morning. "I'm Marcus," he said simply, closing his laptop for the first time in hours, "and I think you should stay here with me until we figure out where you're supposed to wait." Emma's face lit up as if he'd just promised her the world, and she scrambled onto the leather chair beside him, her little legs swinging high above the ground, and said, "Do you have kids, Mr. Marcus? You seem like you might be a daddy." The question hit him like a physical blow, and he had to take a moment before answering. "I have a daughter, Sophia. She's 16 now, but we don't talk much anymore." Emma frowned, her small face suddenly very serious, and asked, "Why not? Did you have a fight?" Marcus looked at this child, this stranger who somehow felt safer than his own therapist, and found himself saying things he'd never admitted aloud. "I worked too much, Emma. I thought I was building a future for her, a legacy, but I missed her school plays, and her birthdays, and her first heartbreak. And somewhere along the way, she stopped needing me. Or maybe she just stopped believing I would show up." Emma considered this with the gravity of someone much older, then patted his hand with her small one and said, "My daddy works a lot too. He has 2 jobs because Grandma's medicine is expensive, but he always calls me before bed and tells me about his day. Even if he's really, really tired, maybe you could call your daughter before her bed." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes for the first time in years, and he nodded, not trusting his voice. An airline representative approached them then, a harried woman with kind eyes, who confirmed, that Emma's unaccompanied minor escort had to leave due to a family emergency and asked if Marcus would be willing to stay with Emma until they could arrange alternative supervision. He found himself agreeing before he'd fully processed the request, something he never did in business. Never acted without calculation and strategy, but this felt different. This felt like maybe the universe was giving him a chance at something he'd lost. The hours that followed transformed Marcus Hartwell in ways no business success ever had. He and Emma played tic-tac-toe on napkins from the coffee shop, with Emma winning more often than not and celebrating each victory with a little dance that made other weary travelers smile. They shared an overpriced pizza that Emma declared was almost as good as Grandma's. They walked to the window and watched planes land and take off in the breaks between storm cells, with Emma pressing her nose against the glass and dreaming aloud about becoming a pilot someday so she could fly through the clouds and touch the stars. Marcus told her stories about Sophia, memories pouring out of him like water from a broken dam at time. 3-year-old Sophia had insisted on wearing her Halloween costume to church for an entire month. The way she used to fall asleep on his chest when he came home from work, back when he still came home at reasonable hours. The intelligence and creativity she'd shown that he'd been too busy to nurture. Emma listened with the intense focus of childhood, asking questions that cut to the heart of things. Do you think she remembers the good times too? And if you love her so much, why don't you tell her? And the one that broke him completely, don't you think she might be waiting for you to try again? As the evening deepened and the storm raged outside, Emma grew quieter, more reflective, and she shared her own fears that her grandma might not recognize her because she'd grown so much since summer, that the angels might take her grandma before Emma could say goodbye. That her parents worked so hard and worried so much, and she tried to be brave for them, but sometimes at night, she was scared too. Marcus held this little girl who wasn't his daughter, but who had somehow become his teacher, and he promised her that her grandma would know her the moment she saw her, because love doesn't forget. That being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing hard things, even when you are scared, and that her parents were lucky to have such a thoughtful, kind daughter. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus made a decision that terrified him more than any corporate merger. He pulled out his phone, found Sophia's number, the one he'd stared at countless times without dialing, and with Emma watching encouragingly, he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and he was about to hang up when he heard her voice, cautious and surprised. Dad. His voice shook as he said, "Hi, sweetheart. I know I have no right to call out of the blue like this. I know I've let you down more times than I can count, but I'm sitting here in an airport with a very wise 7-year-old who asked me why I don't talk to my daughter, and I realized I don't have a good answer. I don't have any answer except that I've been a coward and I've been wrong, and I miss you so much, it feels like I can't breathe sometimes." There was silence on the other end, and Marcus could hear Sophia's breath catch. Could imagine her in her bedroom at her mother's house. Could picture the tears he hoped were forming because they meant she still felt something. "I miss you too, Dad," she whispered, and those 5 words felt like absolution, like grace, like a door opening that he'd thought was locked forever. They talked for 45 minutes, Marcus missing a business call for the first time in his career and not caring at all. And he apologized without excuses, listened without defending himself, and promised not just to do better, but to be better, to show up, to be present, to rebuild trust one day at a time, however long it took. When he finally hung up, Emma was beaming at him with such pride and joy that he laughed through his tears, and she said, "See, I knew she was waiting for you. Daddies and daughters are special like that." The announcement came at 9:30 that flights would resume. Emma's flight to Boston would board at 10:15, and as they walked to her gate together, Marcus holding her small hand in his, he felt both gratitude and gratitude for this unexpected gift, this child who had appeared exactly when he needed her, and grief that their time together was ending. At the gate, Emma's new escort arrived, a grandfather figure with a warm smile, and Emma turned to Marcus with solemn ceremony and said, "Mr. Marcus, I think you should have Mr. Hoppers for a little while, to remind you about being brave and calling your daughter and not getting lost in your work. And when you and Sophia are friends again, really good friends, you can give him back to me." Marcus started to protest that Mr. Hoppers was too precious, that her grandmother had made him. But Emma pressed the worn rabbit into his hands and whispered, "Grandma always says the best gifts are the ones we need to give away, and I think you need Mr. Hoppers right now more than me." Marcus knelt down, regardless of his expensive suit on the airport floor, and hugged this remarkable child who had changed his life in a single evening, and told her, "Thank you, Emma. You've given me something more valuable than you know, and I'm going to keep Mr. Hoppers safe, and I'm going to make you proud, and your grandma is going to love seeing you so much." Emma boarded her flight with a final wave, and Marcus stood at the window watching the plane taxi away, clutching a stuffed rabbit and feeling more purpose than he'd felt in a decade. His own flight to Seattle was canceled. He sent an email declining the merger meeting, recommending his VP lead the negotiations instead, and he booked a flight to Denver, where his ex-wife and daughter lived. 6 months later, Marcus Hartwell stood in the audience of his daughter's school theater production, front row center, having attended every rehearsal he could, and when Sophia took her bow and their eyes met, she smiled at him with forgiveness and love that felt like coming home. Mr. Hopper sat on his office desk now, a daily reminder that wisdom comes from unexpected places, that it's never too late to choose differently, that being lost is only permanent if we refuse to ask for directions. Marcus had framed a photo that Emma's mother had sent him, the little girl and her grandmother, together and smiling, taken the day Emma arrived in Boston, with a note that read, "Thank you for taking care of our brave girl." Her grandma passed peacefully 3 weeks after this photo, knowing Emma loved her. "We're forever grateful." Marcus had sent Mr. Hoppers back with a letter of his own, telling Emma about his reconciliation with Sophia, about the fishing trips and movie nights and therapy sessions, about choosing presence over profit, and Emma had written back in careful 7-year-old handwriting, "I knew you could do it. Mr. Marcus, you were never really lost, you just forgot which way was home." Now, as Marcus watched his daughter shine on stage, as he planned their weekend hiking trip, as he felt the fullness of a life measured in moments rather than mergers, he understood what Emma had taught him in that airport, that sometimes the person who rescues us is the one we think we're helping, that children see truths adults spend lifetimes hiding from, and that the bravest thing a man can do is admit he's lost and ask a little girl to help him find his way back to love.